Don't Gödel's incompleteness theorems prove that reality cannot be mathematical? Gödel's incompleteness theorems are arguably the most misinterpreted theorems in intellectual history. Wittgenstein refused to accept them and dismissed them as a conjuring trick. Wittgenstein rightly stated that mathematics is a system of analytic tautology, and such a system can by definition be neither incomplete nor inconsistent. What Godel actually demonstrated, although this is not widely appreciated, was that any attempt to define mathematics using a man-made system of non-tautological axiomatic logic will inevitably generate incompleteness or inconsistency. This, in fact, is true of any subject. Science, for example, is incomplete and inconsistent, and that is why it cannot unify its two-star theories. General relativity and quantum mechanics. They contradict each other because they are derived from different, conflicting axioms. There is an easy way to avoid Gödel's intellectual wrecking ball, and that is to derive mathematics from a single axiom, a single principle, a single master formula. This is exactly what ontological mathematics achieves. The whole thing is derived from the principle of sufficient reason, which cannot be incomplete or inconsistent under any circumstances. If it were, we could not rely on reason and logic, and the whole of reality would collapse into chaos. Euler's formula is what you get when you express the principle of sufficient reason as a mathematical formula, and the whole of ontological mathematics is exclusively based on this. Hence is an immense tautological expression of this formula, hence does not fall foul of Wittgenstein's definitive criterion. As soon as you try to build a system from several independent, non-tautological axioms, you run into a more complex version of Cartesian dualism. Descartes defined mind and matter in independent and exclusive terms, and the problem then immediately arose of how they could interact since they had nothing in common. If you take axioms that are radically independent, i.e., incapable of being derived from a single unifying principle or master axiom, then why would you have any expectation at all that they could work together completely and consistently or work together at all? Gödel formalized the impossibility of such an approach. Gödel's work has nothing to do with actual mathematics, ontological mathematics, the mathematics of reality, but with the man-made attempt to base mathematics on an arbitrary group of axioms that humans pluck out of thin air and hope and believe will all work together in the right way. They definitely won't, and this should have been obvious without Gödel. This, in fact, is exactly the problem that scientism faces, and shows how scientism cannot concern reality and cannot be the answer to everything. It is riddled with incompleteness and inconsistency and does not even attempt to start from any sort of position that might offer any hope of reaching completeness and consistency. The scientific method begins with the instruction to observe. What in the word observe would inevitably lead to the construction of complete and consistent theories? Human observations are fantastically limited, unreliable, fallible, incomplete, and inconsistent. So how on earth would such observations produce complete and consistent theories? And the history of science, with its endless discarded theories, shows that it doesn't. Why don't people use this as evidence that reality cannot be scientific? Why do they pick on mathematics? Isn't it odd that mathematics is held to a completely different standard? Is Abrahamism complete and consistent? Is Eastern mysticism? Is any spiritual system? In fact, there is only one complete and consistent system, and that is ontological mathematics. Gödel believed in an eternal objective truth, independent of human thought, which, he imagined, could only be apprehended imperfectly by the human mind. What he should have concluded was that we can and must derive absolute truth from a single principle, which can never be incomplete or inconsistent with respect to itself. And that is the principle of sufficient reason, the entire basis of rationality and logic. Gödel said, but every error is due to extraneous factors. Reason itself does not err. This is exactly right. Ontological reason as opposed to man-made reason, which is never true reason because it is always based on fallible, non-tautological man-made language, and not on nature's infallible, tautological language of mathematics can never err under any circumstances. Nature, syntactically, never makes a single error. It's impossible for nature to make syntactic mistakes. If it could, the universe would become totally unstable and implode. Errors would instantly spread everywhere and destroy everything. In fact, the universe could never form in the first place if it were subject to inherent syntactic incompleteness and inconsistency. Ontological mathematics is not adversely affected in any way by Gödel's theorems. In fact, it's designed not to be. No mathematical logician could possibly challenge ontological mathematics using Gödel's methodology. The mathematical source is not based on anything invented by humans. It's eternal, fundamental, and ontological. It exists whether humans are around or not. Reality must be 100% complete and consistent at all times under any ontologically valid operation. Gödel's theorems actually serve as absolute support for ontological mathematics, since they would destroy any system other than ontological mathematics, whether mainstream religion or scientism. When properly understood, Gödel's work proves that mathematics is not man-made, that the mathematical source can't be invented by humans, and that ontological mathematics alone can provide a complete and consistent answer to existence. Any incomplete or inconsistent answer is immediately invalidated by the fact of incompleteness or inconsistency. The truth of existence is unfalsifiable. The fact that science frequently asserts that a statement must be falsifiable in order to qualify as a scientific statement proves that science is not a system of truth. By definition, no absolute, infallible, eternal, necessary truth can ever be falsifiable. Science literally sets its face against absolute truth, and hence the absolute answer to existence. It does so because it is based on empiricism and materialism rather than rationalism and idealism. The former can never lead to absolute truth. It is impossible for science to arrive at a final theory of everything because, by science's own standards, the proposed final theory would need to be falsifiable, and so self-evidently can never be considered final. At any time, new empirical data could emerge that would refute it. So much for scientism. Ontological mathematics is the sole valid final theory of everything. If you oppose it, you are opposed to the truth, and you do not want the answer to existence.